Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Carlos, the Brown Liquor Cigars podcast, and we have Omar.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good. And we have special guest, Jason.
Hey, what's happening?
Hey. All right, Jason, if you want, before we get started, you tell the listeners whatever you want them to know about yourself.
Just a little bit about me. Born and raised Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
Been in Dallas for 10 years, and I enjoy it.
Okay. Nice. Okay. So this topic is something we've discussed here and there on a few episodes, but we've never had an episode specifically tailored to this. And this is about masculinity.
Woo! Yeah!
Omar's favorite topic. So, all right. So I'm going to start with you, Jason. When you hear the word masculine, what are some traits or what is the definition of masculine to you?
I think of protective provision. I think of decision maker. I think of leader. I think of identity. Those are at least the first 4 or 5 things that I look up when it comes to masculine. And just making a decision and just sticking with it, carrying it.
Right. Okay.
Whatever the situation is.
Okay. I'm going to come back to something you said. I like that. Okay. And Omar, what is your definition, or what are some of your highlights or points you'd say?
Yeah, so for me, when I think of masculinity, I think of a man that has a purpose, that has goals, that has morals and values, and he actually executes and lives by those principles.
Okay. So I guess this is a question for both of you because you both kind of gave intangible answers. So would you agree that society or a lot of women think that some things that are masculine include things like, you know, a guy who's handy, maybe around the house, or a guy who is a diehard sports fan? Like I know my grandfather, like he's passed away now, but he was super into sports. I didn't get that gene from him, but so much to the point where you could ask him the stats from a game back in '98, and he pulls out this book, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you know, I can tell you like who won, like how many rebounds so and so got," and then he would have like a little TV sitting on top of the big TV, so he could watch like 2 games at one time. So I think those things are kind of maybe the traditional things that people think of in masculinity. So would you say, how do y'all feel about those types of things? Omar, I'll start with you. Like some of
those tangible things.
Mm-hmm.
I think those traditionally are things that you would, people or society would group as masculine.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like you said, being handy, being able to work with your hands, just being physically strong, mentally, emotionally. Obviously being outdoors, doing things that are physical. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of hits to your point, like things that people would think in society are masculine.
Right. Okay. Jason, what about you?
I have no problem with it at all, and I think that it should be. I totally agree with Omar, because the thing is, a man should be able to learn how to work with his hands on some things, like painting, carpentry, pulling carpet or something out of the room or whatnot, being able to landscape. Being able to fix a sink or something, do those things, like that's something that he should be able to do. So you don't want situations like that, so you would have to spend additional money, but also take the time and effort to do it.
Okay. So would it be fair then to say that you think if a man doesn't have some of those traits, does it make him less than a man? And like, let's say maybe he upholds those first 4 that you gave. Okay.
No, absolutely not.
Cool. I know one thing I guess kind of stereotypical of men to have is a sense of direction. So y'all, I don't know if you know, but John knows. Like, I'm not good with directions. Like, I kind of got that from both sides, because my dad's not great with directions and my mom is not good at all with directions. So I'm not really that great with it, but that's something that I think, and y'all let me know if you disagree, but I think sometimes people think it's characteristically given to a man to have. And like, I even have friends, I even have a coworker who is funny. She does a lot of the DIY house projects, like you were saying, like the carpentry and like things like that. And her husband knows a little bit of it, but it's just funny to me to hear, even in this day and age where the roles aren't so black and white as they used to be. But I think because we've been programmed to think, okay, men are supposed to do this and women are supposed to do that, that it even sounds a little foreign to me to hear her say, like, oh yeah, I remodeled the bathroom. And when she says remodel, she doesn't mean like I put up some flowers or change color. Like she's actually like pulling up tile and that sort of thing. So what do y'all do? Would you be turned off, or would you exclude a woman on your list that has some of those traditionally masculine traits? Would she be X'd off your list if she had, like, I mean, let's say she's totally feminine, but she can kick the hell up out of a carpet. She can just rip a carpet.
You can't have it both ways on that. She's either feminine or she's not. Because it's like, okay.
But does that make her masculine if she knows how to do some of those things?
Again, like I said before. Yeah, it does make her masculine.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does make her masculine.
So it takes away, you're saying.
Not complete 100%, but it's
but
like,
yeah,
you kind of got some nigga to you. Be like, oh, hey, man, hold on, let's think this through. Be like, oh, wait a minute, you kind of, what's going on here? Be just like, yeah, and the reason why I'm saying that is because it's like, okay, it's one thing if, like, you're helping out here and there or something, but when you get up and then just completely like, oh, take charge. Let me get up on my high horse and then just start breaking everything down. It's like, damn, you're emasculating them. Not doing that.
I'm not saying like she's taking charge of it, but I'm just saying she knows. Okay, so I'll give you a good example. So like my grandparent. Okay, so like I was talking about my grandfather. He knew how to do a lot of work with his hands, like carpentry, painting, that sort of thing. So him and my grandmother had 5 kids. So they had 4 girls and 1 boy. So naturally, my uncle picked up on a lot of that. So he has like those traditionally masculine traits. But maybe not so much my mom, but like some of my other aunts, like they have a lot of those traits that they picked up from my grandfather. But it's pretty much because that's how they grew up. You know what I mean? Like they grew up seeing that.
Yeah, but they're also going to have a high probability of growing up without a man neither, because you got to let a man play the situation out and see if he can actually work around what they can do. Either call somebody or let him fix it and get the decision making first. But when you go in and be like, oh yeah, we need to get this done, and then you backdoor him and do it yourself, oh, he's going to start.
Oh yeah. That's a different.
What I'm
no. That's a different thing. No, I'm
My
saying.
bad.
I'm just saying.
Sorry about that.
Just that she has the skill to do it, but not overstepping bounds or anything like that. Just the fact that she has a skill, like maybe she's a good painter, or you may not even know it until maybe you get a house and then it's like, oh damn, I didn't know you could paint like that. And maybe she just brings it.
I'm saying like let the situation play out first to see what he can do. If that ain't his skill set, then it's like, okay, cool. Then you'd be like, all right, let's work on this. Let's work on it together.
Okay.
Work at it as a team project. Okay. But now you have a lot of women nowadays are like, oh man, like I said, let me go ahead, and they just need to do it right then and there. And it's like, okay, are you one-upping me? Like, okay, you kind of make me question my manhood. Like, what in the whole hell's going on here?
Yeah, and I think, Jason, you bring up a good point that I think what you're saying is women that kind of tend to just bypass the guy, and say, hey, I want to work on this project. I think in my case, I had a dad that wasn't very handy. He worked in sales, right? So some of those, but my ex-wife, like her dad was like a tile layer or whatever. So there was times where there was some conflict because she expected me to know what her dad knew, right? And that was an issue too, to where she's like, hey, well, I have this project that I would like you to work on. And like you said, Jason, if it was something where like, oh, well, I know a cousin, it'd be an issue because be like, well, why don't you do it yourself? Right? It's like, well, if I'm being resourceful and maybe I don't know how to do it, and maybe I want to pay somebody to at least help me or do it, the job. Why is that an issue? But I think it was kind of like questioning my masculinity in that sense.
Okay, so and in that regard, I can totally see that. But if hypothetically in your situation when you were married, like let's say you brought that up. Or she brought it up. Like maybe like, you talk about this project or whatever y'all want to do, tile project. And if her phrasing was different, if she had said, hey, maybe let's work on this project together. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you find out as you get into it, well, you probably already knew because her dad was in that field. But I'm just saying, you maybe find out as you go along, like, oh, she's more handy than I thought she was. Then would that be okay? Or is that a deal breaker to you now as a single man where a woman may be handy or, have those traditional masculine traits?
Yeah, for me, it wouldn't be a deal breaker. It would just be one of those things that as long as, it's not the situation where she's doing it to kind of shit test me and try to question my masculinity, then I wouldn't have an issue with it. But being through it and kind of experiencing that, a lot of the times I feel that it might come from like, okay, well, let me test how handy he is, or let me kind of rattle him or see if he knows how to do this or whatnot. Okay. But I think as a man too, on the flip side, it's like, hey, if there's a skill that you might not know or you're not too handy, like Jason was saying, hey, Home Depot has like free classes on carpentry or, different skills that you can pick up for free, on the weekends. Yeah. So it's just one of those things. But, I do agree, like, hey, changing a tire, you should be able to, every man should know how to do that or change, like something in the toilet or in the sink, something simple.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're going to switch gears just a tad bit. So this phrase, I hear it so much that I feel like I almost don't even know what it means because people say it so much. Toxic masculinity. Yeah. So when we talk about that, like, I know we talked about what masculinity is, but what is toxic masculinity? Omar, I'll start with you. What do you think it is?
I think I think it started with the ideal. I feel it comes from a couple of decades ago where you had the sense of let's just say the men in the household that ruled by authority, meaning they had a couple of side pieces on the side and they had their family. Whether they're alcoholics or not, but that was, I think, a lot of the feminist movement was born to kind of combat that. But now I feel that the culture with women today, everything that they disagree on with men, right away it's like, oh, that's toxic masculinity, right? So I feel that now it's broader to where, even if you say something that they disagree with or question, then you're toxic.
Okay. So what would be an example you would say of a woman that says, what would be something that she says to rebut a guy and it's toxic, or they think it's toxic masculinity to you?
That they would say, hey, you're being toxic. Yeah. It's your toxic masculinity. I think having a traditional mindset in marriage, right? It's like I know in the past we've talked about certain tangibles in marriage or relationships, right? So coming from a traditional sense of like cooking, cleaning, in the past, I think that qualifies as toxic masculinity to them. To them, yeah.
Okay. So for those of y'all who are just tuning in for the first time, Omar believes, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the traditional role of a woman in marriage is for her to cook and clean. So that's why I was laughing when you said that, because I know that's,
well, I'm saying
like
that's an example,
list, right?
And just using it as an example because we've discussed it before in the podcast. Mm-hmm. A lot of women or today's society or feminist movement would consider that toxic masculinity.
Okay. To have that demand for a relationship.
Not demand or requirement or ideal. Even the ideal of like, hey, what's your ideal of a traditional marriage? Just even saying that would be classified as toxic masculinity.
Okay. All right. Well, Jason, what do you think toxic masculinity is to you? Or what are some examples? Or what do you, I guess just what do you think of just openly when you hear that term? Like what comes to mind to you?
I think it's bullshit.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I say this is because this is what I mean by this. You want to say toxic masculinity? No, it's just masculinity in general. The difference is that you have to take it any which way that you go with it, because at the end of the day, you want a man to make decisions, but yet when he does make a decision, it's like, oh, it's toxic, or it's this, it's that. Oh, he's trying to make me back to the 50s. No, he ain't trying to make you go back to the 50s. He ain't trying to have you do this and that. The fact of the matter is that there's just borders and there's lines and there's structure. And that's what the man is supposed to do when it comes to a relationship. He's supposed to bring an identity and a structure, and that's where logic comes into the building. And I don't believe in toxic, because the thing is that when you look at toxic, it's like, okay, did he try to control you? Did he beat you? No. Did he try to control the narrative? No. He just want to put boundaries on certain situations. And you wanted to go back to what you're saying, the shit test, to answer questions like that there ain't no good answer for it. It's like, oh, do I look fat in this dress? Like, come on, you put me there. Don't put me in that matter. It's like it's just one of those situations to where it's like it's so much stuff that's like men can't really be men anymore because they're neutered. But then again, it's like you want the man to be this man, but it's like you bring in such unrealistic expectation to where it goes back again, cosmic Santa Claus. It's like, no, that's how you treating Jesus as. It's like, oh, I want a man to do this. I want a man to do that. Oh, I want that. Let's see. I want him this tall. I want him this height. I want him this weight. I want him to have a 12% body fat.
Oh,
and I want
not 12%.
And I want him hung like a horse, too. And I want to be coordination of footwork. That's what I want, God. Come on, thank you, Jesus. It's like, no, you can't have that. And it's like, and at the end of the day, and then it's like, it's... Because I looked at it like this. It's only fine when a man can sit there and play both ends of the fence when it comes to decision making, but when a man stands his ground and when he carries it, that's when you have a problem with it.
Okay, so what do you think, though, about the concept of toxic masculinity even outside of relationships, too? Because
like what?
Well, because you hear a lot of times, you'll hear people say boys aren't supposed to do X, Y, Z. So is that toxic masculinity, or is that just like defining roles? Because like, so like I'll use myself as an example. So like I played sports, but I never was like somebody who was like
you
on
didn't
a team.
excel at them.
Yeah. That wasn't my thing. And it wasn't, and not even so much excelling, really. It was more so like music was my thing. Like I love music. So in some people's eyes, they may see that as less masculine. Just like even today, like you see a lot of women on the flip side, they may excel more, have an interest more in sports. Would you consider stuff like that toxic masculinity?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying that is because people have to understand, and if people are looking at it like that, then don't be naive. Because at the end of the day, everybody ain't the fucking same. They're not, no matter how you cut it or slice it. It's like you want situations to where it's like you want your man to be a little bit more handy, have a little bit more. That needs to be brought up and that needs to be talked about. At the end of the day, behind closed doors, tell them and put your grievances out. That's called microeconomics. Basically, it's the same thing as if you took an econ class. Micro, macro. You want to, then that's called opportunity cost. You look at opportunity and say, okay, with this particular opportunity, this is what I have, and this is what needs to be done, and this is the cost of that. This is the pros and cons of every decision. And that should happen with the same way with masculinity. I don't believe in toxic masculinity because the fact is that you can't play both ends of the fence. He's either masculine or he's not. You can't have someone that you can't have that person to tell them to make a decision, and then you want to straddle the fence every time he does it. Or you want him to be masculine to make a decision, but it's like you don't trust his decision-making skill set. Or you're 50-50 on it. Or you do, but you think that he's going to fail. That's being disingenuous. Am I making sense, or are you
no, it makes sense. No, so one thing I want to ask.
Or did I miss something? Because I kind of read your body language like, okay.
No. I want to ask you something about something you said, because I think this is really key about bringing up the conversation and behind closed doors. I totally agree with that, because I feel like I'm the type of person, like, in a relationship, don't make a scene, because I'm pretty laid back. But if I'm in a relationship with you and you make a scene in public, then you just took me there. Like, we both about to make a scene if it's something in public.
But again, that's different because.
But no. But
my bad.
No, what I'm saying though is, so at what point do you think, just for the women that are listening, should she bring that up, or is it, at what point is it kind of like a shit or get out the pot moment? And I say that because if a woman knows that she wants a man to be, or to have like certain handy requirements, I guess you could say, or what she thinks is masculine, then at what point does she just accept him for who he is? You know what I mean? Like, or like, when does she even bring that up in the relationship?
I say within the first 6 months.
Okay, so pretty early.
Yeah.
Okay, so not like a year in and it's like, babe, I need you to.
Yeah, because the thing is that she need to know that's within his wheelhouse.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what
that's
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like you got to know what within the wheelhouse.
Okay.
Like, okay, what is his? Basically, you want to do a SWOT analysis.
Okay.
A mental SWOT analysis with your man or your woman or something. Be like, okay, what you can stomach and what you can't. What's the strengths? What's the weaknesses? What's the opportunities? And what's the threats behind this? Okay. If this is a particular threat, let me pull back. I might want to. That's kind of a red flag for me. I'll throw in the towel. I'll bounce out. Or if it's a situation where, like, okay, if you notice she got an attitude, but she's hot as hell, it's like, are you going to deal with the attitude so you can keep banging her, or are you just going to be like, hey, might want to pull this. Let me pull this back a little bit.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people do what you just said. Like, they compensate, men and women, for things that they probably maybe wouldn't tolerate because the sex is good, or because
I've done that many a time. I've done that many a times, man. Like, I've done that a few times. Like, I really have. Like, oh boy. Like, I just had a couple predicaments to where it's like that a couple years back when that happened. I mean, it is what it is. It's like, oh man, she was a pure bitch on wheels. But the fact is that she was so smoking hot. I'm like, damn. Like, I don't need you to do a whole bunch of talking. I need you to just be chill for about 30 minutes, maybe 32 tops. And then all I need you to do is just look good. Don't talk so much. Just look good. That's all I need you to do. I don't need you to do nothing else. At the end of the day, like, that's it.
Okay. All right. Okay, so one point I want to dissect, I guess, from the toxic masculinity part is emotions. So I know for me, like, we can talk broadly. It doesn't have to be just relationships, but I'm putting this out there as relationship for me. Or just a personality trait I think people perceive me to have. So I am an emotional person. Like, I do process. I'm very analytical. Like, I think about a lot of things. I may not always say everything, but I think about a lot of things in my head. But sometimes in close relationships, I've been told that I'm hard to read emotionally.
So you're stoic.
Yeah. I don't think I am, but that's the perception. Yeah. That's the perception.
You're stoic.
Yeah.
From the personality traits of the 7, which one are you? Are you Alpha, Bravo, Sigma, Beta, Delta, Omega. And there's one that I'm missing, but it's left me for a moment. I apologize. Which one?
I don't remember which one I am.
Or Gamma.
Of those. I know what you're talking about. I don't.
Because
Yeah,
that's on
I can't
Charisma
remember.
on Command. And that's in the book, The Charisma Myth.
I've read what they are, but I can't remember like verbatim like what the requirements are or what the definitions for each one are. But I've basically been told that sometimes I can come across as like cold emotionally, but that's not, really the case. But I feel like it's more acceptable for me as a guy to be that way because a lot of society feels like men are not emotional creatures. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
So, like,
most of the time we're pretty much not because men are more logic. Men are mostly more so logic driven. And with the logic driven, that comes back to, okay, what side of the fence are you on? Because you have to be one of the seven. There's no other way. It's like when it's more emotional, because a lot of things you have to take the emotion out when it comes to most stuff in life. And you just have to make a hard stop on a decision.
okay. So you're not. So would you consider yourself to be less emotional if you had to pick between the two, is like emotional or non-emotional? Would you be?
Oh, I'm logic based.
Okay.
And I always look for a transaction.
Okay.
I always look for it. Like,
Okay.
I care
So
about
no.
transaction. I look for results. I don't give a shit about the emotions. Because at the end of the day, and the reason why I say that is because emotional decisions will get you in the poorhouse. Emotional decisions will get you into prison. Emotional decisions will get you put in the grave. There has to be logic somewhere. And that's where the man has to play the role and has to have the identity. Because if he doesn't have that, he don't have shit else.
Okay.
And he has to carry it like that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you want to carry every situation, every decision that you know that you made, even though that you got to know and understand what are the pros and cons of it. Again, it comes back to opportunity cost. What the opportunity cost is, are you able to live with the decision and are you able to deal with the blowback on everything that happened? If you're able to deal with the blowback and look at the results and say, okay, I can restructure, I can rebuild, I can restore, and it's not career suicide. And if you have, and again, that's where I know, like what I've used to, a lot of the hurdles that I've grew up with that I had to go through. I always knew and I always had confidence in myself to know that I can leave a situation, never go back to it again, won't even think twice, or I'll just bury it. Because at the end of the day, I've always looked at scenarios with an abundance lifestyle and confidence to say like, okay, you don't want me? Fine. I'll go and do something else. Or I'll go and do that within a career. I always knew how to transform and I knew how to transition.
Okay. And I can definitely, I commend that, especially for career in that pocket. But would you say if that translates to every area in your life?
It translates to every area, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if in relationships,
It
if
ain't
you
no gray.
bury
It ain't no gray or color.
Well, no, what I'm saying is when you bury it, has that become problems for you in other relationships? Because I believe personally, I mean, and I have stuff that I've buried too, so don't get me wrong, I'm putting myself in this bucket. But what you don't address to some degree, do you feel like it may hinder future things or like future relationships to some degree?
No.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Okay.
The reason,
So how do you heal from it, or how do you move on from it?
I think about it, I think, and again, I go back to the opportunity cost. I think about the pros and cons of every decision I make, and I figure out, like, okay, is this a time frame for me? Is this the season for me to actually be able to, is this going to be a big loss for me, or is it not going to be a big loss? And
Okay.
that's what goes back to decision making, and figure
Okay.
out, like, okay, am I going to win a benefit from you, or are you a fucking anchor? That's what you have to. That's what men have to figure out and ask themselves. Like, okay, if you're an anchor, if you got more anchor to you, she for the streets.
Okay.
And that's how
So you do have a way out in your head, or
Oh yeah, I already have.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it ain't a way out. It's just the fact that.
Well, I mean, weighing out the options.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, and that's what men have to and need to do when it comes down to it. And they have to be like, look, I made a decision. I'm going to sit on my square, and I'm going to carry it.
Okay. All right. So, Omar, what do you think? And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm really interested in what you're going to say to this because so I feel like I'm kind of a little bit caught in the middle between both of you, meaning that I'm not necessarily outwardly emotional, but I'm an emotional person. So would you say that you're just an emotional guy? Would you say that, or how do you classify yourself?
I think I used to think that I was very stoic, which I think I am. And Jason brings up a good point. I think men typically tend to make decisions based off of logic. Mm-hmm. But now, and if I mentioned this before, like as men, it's really important that you are able to regulate your emotions, right? Because the one place where it does kind of become an issue is when you're in relationships or marriages, right? Because women are emotional creatures, right? So I don't want to say you should manipulate women to feel a certain thing, but you have to go between both worlds, right? Because for me, like there are moments where I just want to like be stoic and logic and make sense out of everything. But when it comes to women, there's things where you're like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? You say that you want me to love you, but then you want me to like smack the shit out of you or something, in bed. So it's just like emotionally, sometimes it's kind of confusing, right? So you got to be able to kind of go between both worlds. But in a sense, I think for men, I think it becomes an issue if you're highly emotional, if you don't channel that towards positive things. Jason had mentioned like, hey, sometimes that manifests if you don't know how to regulate your emotions, that regulates to violence, to where it has like very severe consequences of potentially, killing somebody, being in jail or hurting somebody, right? So there's things where you can channel, that energy into positive things, whether that's sports, music, art, hobbies, those are outlets where you can really channel that energy towards, right? Because I think with emotions, and I've said this before, there's no right or wrong emotion. Sometimes, as men, we tend to feel that whenever we feel bad about ourselves or something negative, that there's something wrong. When really, there might not be something wrong. You might just be down that day, or I know a lot of people, and maybe men nowadays don't talk about it as much, but they do struggle with like depression, anxiety, and I've been there to where, maybe that season in my life has been really stressful to where I feel that there's something wrong. And it might not be that, it just might be that I'm going through a season of, tribulation or obstacles, right? And that's just like my soul and my body telling me that like, hey, you're going through this, but there's nothing wrong with you, or there's no deficiency. But sometimes we just have to be able to regulate those emotions, because again, as men too, like there's moments of, especially if you're in a competitive environment, let's just say sports or bodybuilding or in the gym, where you're pumped and you feel that emotion of like, all right, I can deadlift these 500 pounds, I can bench press 225 or whatnot. So it's just a matter of finding those positive things where you can pour out that energy that we normally experience, throughout the week, throughout the year or months or whatnot, into something positive. So I would say the key word would be to regulate, not necessarily also be like stoic all the time, because again, like you said, it's been an issue in the past for you in relationships, right? Where you're like, dude, do you even have emotions? Like, sometimes they'll poke at you and be like, what are you going to do?
Right.
Hit me. Just trying to get emotion out of you, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's important to note as well.
Okay. And I know we're kind of winding down on time a little bit, but one thing I definitely want to get your opinion on too, Omar, is you have all boys.
Correct.
So do you ever think about ways to prevent them from going through some of those toxic masculinity traits, or is it just maybe you just think of like raising them as because you're a great dad, but like just raising them the right way, or do you even think about how the role of masculinity plays in each of their lives, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a good question, and something that I really want to hit on. That I think naturally as men, like one of the things that I notice with my kids, because they're close in age and they're all boys, they're always fighting, but it's just part of their DNA to be physical, to want to up their brother or be better than their brother, right? So I can tell them 1,000 times, like, hey, don't fight, don't touch your brother, don't hit him. Like literally, I can tell them right now, hey, keep your hands to yourself. 30 seconds later, one of them is choking the other one. So that's just in them, and they're constantly fighting. So I have to be conscious of letting them know, hey, boys are going to be boys. But the one thing that I'm very conscious of is like really giving them a safe space to tell me when they're hurting, right? Whenever they're hurting emotionally or mentally, or they're struggling or they don't feel good enough. Because in the past, the notion has been that, oh, you're a boy, you got to suck it up. And we've talked about it, if you get hurt or whatever, get up right away. When really you might be hurt, whether that's physically or a scenario where, somebody hurt you emotionally and you're struggling. Sometimes I feel that as kids, it's really important to let them know and to assure them that they have a safe space where they can talk about these things, right? Because you don't want it to be, I don't want to raise men that are closed off emotionally or mentally, because that's just setting them up for failure. So if I can help them develop that emotional intelligence, those skills to be able to regulate their emotions, then I think they'll be on a path where they can be great contributors to society and to relationships. Because ultimately, my goal for my kids is that, hey, like they find a woman that's a godly woman, that they can be godly men, and they can flourish in a marriage, and I can get grandkids. So that's kind of my overview mindset when it comes to that.
Okay. All right. So to close us out here, everybody kind of give their shot of truth. So and I'll start with you, Jason, but what would you say to the female listeners who maybe don't know how to properly navigate, or best navigate, I should say, dealing with a man and his masculinity? Because I think it's not necessarily a one size fits all kind of deal, because even for the three of us up here, it may mean different things. But how does a woman, or what advice would you give to a woman to best respect that?
Just be around men more and understand them. Just go to places where a lot of men go and listen to men in conversation. Actually, listen to men on what they say, what they have a problem and issue when they come to women. And actually don't be so fucking emotional and be like, oh, he wrong, he didn't say it. No. Listen to what he's saying and hear him completely out. And then challenge him. See the reason why he said that. And don't be so quick to just hear the reply. Because that's the worst thing that you can do. Mm-hmm. And actually give him the benefit of the doubt. Take yourself and take the emotions out of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I love it. All right, Omar?
Yeah, my advice would be, my shot of truth towards men more would be, hey, if you're struggling when it comes to your masculinity, or you're questioning it, I'll kind of piggyback off of what Jason said. Get around other men. Stop isolating yourself. I think for me, one of the best times in my life when I was in the Marine Corps, because I had a lot of men around me, and it just felt natural, and I was able to be myself. I was able to embrace my masculine trait. So if you're struggling with that, find a group of men, whether that's in church, be in community, so you can talk about your struggles. Hey, plan some breakfast, or go out to, if you're a physical guy, hey, invite your buddies to the gym, workout session, go hiking. I love to walk, I love to rock. So those are things that you can involve yourself with, and then also, don't be afraid to kind of tell people what you're feeling, obviously in a safe space, but don't shy away from those masculine traits of feeling anger or feeling passion, because those are things that are part of being a masculine man, right? As long as you have a positive outlet to pour out that energy too. Okay. Right, so that would be my advice to the men listeners listening to this podcast. And John.
Okay. Hey, great points, both of you. The only thing I would just add is for any of the ladies that are listening specifically, don't think or don't put all men in one bucket. One thing I kind of hate to hear some women say is, oh, well, my dad used to do X, Y, Z, or kind of like how you were saying the situation that you were in, Omar. Okay, that's great. Then date your dad. I mean, not really date your daddy, but, if that's the case, then, don't talk to me, So I think you have to respect a man where he is in his masculinity, and not make all of these comparisons with what it should be, like society says, or maybe what you grew up with, and now you're putting those expectations on the guy that you're with. I would say
just work around his wheelhouse.
Yeah,
simple.
True. Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
Hey, all right. With that, hey, that's a wrap.
All right. Peace.
Peace.